Fukushima, the collapsed bridge in Genwa. We all know these pictures by heart. These disasters could have been prevented by appropriate risk assessment of the infrastructure. Bta's challenge is to find the most attractive market to start such a EU service. Bta distributes EU-based analytical tools for the risk assessment of critical infrastructure. Using the VCW, we chose Texas, USA as our starting point. For a successful start, we need the right people to market and build our service, around $500,000 funding, and 12 months to deliver a first version of our website and app. With this elevator pitch, I welcome you all to our presentation on Bta, the company who distributes EU's service for the risk assessment of critical infrastructure. This is our team. Happy to quickly introduce them. We have Luisa, Alexander, Laura, Beatrice, and myself, Dominic. So let's start with some context. What is considered a critical infrastructure? There are 16 so-called sectors we can distinguish. For example, we have nuclear reactors, we have the financial system, we have dams, we have transportation systems, but we also have, for example, the energy sector. To give you a feeling on why risk assessment of these critical infrastructure is very, very important, here are some examples from the past. Let's take, for example, Fukushima, the disaster with their nuclear power plant, where, for example, over 20,000 people were killed or missed. More than 500,000 of residential buildings were destroyed or damaged. So a huge disaster. And all of that because there was a lack of appropriate security systems in place for the earthquake, which happened with a magnitude of 9.0. Or another example, let's take the collapsed bridge of the Morandi Bridge in Genua in Italy in 2018, where more than 200 people were displaced from their homes just because of a lack of appropriate maintenance of a very important stabilization cable on the bridge. So, as you can see, it is crucial to prevent such disaster, and appropriate risk assessment can do that. So our goal of our startup, Bta, is to provide our customers with understandable data to support the risk assessment of critical infrastructure. To do so, we use Earth observation. Below you can see kind of the before and after pictures. So on the left side we have like typical critical infrastructure like nuclear power plants or bridges or kind of the grid, electric grid. And on the right side you see kind of the analyzed pictures where you see different dots and from green to red, and when it's red you see certain changes happening and then certain actions are needed. So our solution provides values to our customers in different ways. For example, it saves them cost and they gain planability. It helps them also to improve safety and prevent further disasters to happen. And also they can have a much easier and faster maintenance, and also they get recommendations for specific actions they should take if they, for example, our systems discovers certain changes in the infrastructure and the red dot, for example, comes up. So our challenge was that to find the best market to start our service for the risk assessment of critical infrastructure. To do so, we used the VCW framework and all its phases to have a structured approach to this problem. And now we're going to go through phase 1 all the way to phase 5. So let's start with phase 1, discover value. In this phase, we conducted various internal and external and internal plus external analyses. In the following slides, we're going to go through one by one of them and have a deep dive in the different type of analysis we did. So let's start with the relevance of our service and key stakeholders. So critical infrastructure are a big threat to our planet and society. We saw that in the two examples in the beginning, because they threat, for example, our well-being of our society. They can disrupt households and businesses, but also they can cause irreversible environmental disasters to our planet. So with the use of EU data, we can mitigate the risk of such disasters by, for example, detecting early risks on changes of the infrastructure. Further, you can capture and track structural changes dynamically over days, weeks, or even years. So our solution benefits various stakeholders. So for example, the four main ones we identified was the government, our society itself, our planet, and also the operator of the infrastructure. A clear mission and vision value statement is key for the success of a startup. So we defined that our mission is the distribution of EU data-based analytical tools for critical infrastructure. Bta's main values are transparency, integrity, and honesty. And finally, our vision is to protect our society and planet from further disasters like the before mentioned. So the risk assessment of critical infrastructure helps to achieve the SDGs goals 9.1, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and also specifically 11.4, which is about sustainable cities and communities. Further, it is also aligned with the Paris Agreement, specifically with point 8.1, and also with the European Green Deal, and specifically with the Sendai framework. We also conducted a Pastel analysis, and we identified the importance of three main parts of Pastel. The three main parts are political, technological, and environmental. The political is really important because we are really closely working with the government, so we need the support of them. Usually critical infrastructure is either owned and run by government. So we need to have a good relationship with a stable government, which kind of, for us, helps to have a stable and long-lasting relationship. On the other side, we need also the right technology available in the country. So we need a good internet infrastructure. We need to have a country where they are ready for such an innovative solution to do risk assessment of their infrastructure. And lastly, for us, it's also important to see how the environmental policies evolve. For example, if certain countries are a bit ahead, it could be really interesting to go into these countries first, because it would help us to make our pitch for such a solution. Another part we did was kind of a deep dive on the competitors. On the first step, we kind of did some research and found quite a few of them. And we compared them kind of in size and also in the expertise the end user needed. So we compared how easy is it to use for the end user and how big is their market share currently. Then we also kind of narrowed it down to these four. We focused on Orbital I, Razor, GeoSHM, and Mosky, and kind of compared a little bit what areas do they cover currently, what are the customer types they serve, and also where they're located. And specifically important, I would say, was the services they offer. So some are, for example, focusing only on oil, gas pipelines and water pipelines, like the typical pipeline observation, which would be Orbital I, for example. So we try to compare them and have a good picture of our competitors. In the next step, we deep dived even further. So we really wanted to compare the service itself. So we compared these four before mentioned with our service Bta, and saw, like, for example, things like the prediction time, or which period they analyze, and also which companies they serve. Is it only government or also private ones? So we compared the services really in a granular fashion. As competitors, we also identified indirect competitors, so not only other EU data-based services, but also the risk assessment of critical infrastructure can also be done with other tools. For example, we identified drones, or for example, UAVs or cable cameras, which could be kind of a replacement for EU data-based critical assessment of infrastructure. And now I leave the floor to Laura.
Thank you, Dominic. So moving on, another analysis that we performed is the 5 forces analysis. For what concerns the threat for new entrant, this force is a medium level. This because even though this industry is becoming more attractive thanks to the available government fundings and an increased awareness of sustainability factors, there are some entry barriers. We have structural barriers that are long-term contracts with governments and customer switching costs, but also strategic barriers that looks at the access to licenses, certifications, and agreement with governments. Then for what concerns the power of buyers, also in this case, we have a medium force. So this because there is a relatively low competition in the downstream Earth observation service provider, and also because there was the existence of long-term contracts with governments. On the other hand, when we talk about the power of suppliers, in this case, these forces of high intensity, because there are very few suppliers of Earth observation data. Their services are tailored to each customer, so the switching costs are higher, and there is a high dependence on these suppliers. For what concerns instead the threat of substitute services, in this case, these forces of low intensity, because Earth observation data and services are very specific and tailored for each customer, so it's very hard to replicate them. For this reason, these forces is very low. And finally, for what concerns the competitive rivalry, these forces of low medium intensity. This because there is a medium competition in the market. This because this industry is quite new, so it is on the growth stage and of the life cycle of the market. So in this case, the competition is quite low, so this is for what concerns the 5 force analysis. Then we performed also the SWOT analysis, and looking at some strengths that we have. Are the fact that we have an agile team culture, and we have the access to academic resources, and our services are very comprehensible and tailored to each customer. In any case, we have also some weaknesses. The most important one are the fact that our core team is quite inexperienced in this field, so we need highly qualified employees, and also we don't have actually a lot of customers to improve our knowledge. Then we have also some opportunities that we have to try to catch, and the first one is that there are more incentive regarding sustainability and environmental concerns, but most importantly, nowadays we have an improvement in new technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning, and this can lead to improvements in remote controlling of these critical infrastructure. Then we have also some threats that we should try to avoid or to transform them in opportunities. And these can be, for instance, that some companies have more knowledge about the market than ourselves, and there can be some difficulties in accessing information that are protected by the government. So in order to understand better our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, we also performed a TOWS matrix. And in particular, for what concerns our maxi strategy, it tells us that governments and operators of critical infrastructure can use our comprehensive services and data sets to improve environmental pollution and sustainability. Well, for what concerns our maximum strategy, it tells us that thanks to the artificial intelligence support, we can rely less on external IT services to access and analyze data, reducing this way one of our weaknesses. While looking at the mini-maxi strategy, we see that through valuable collaboration with governments, it can be easier to access sensitive data that public authority protect, and also the access to academic resources from our university helps to minimize the wrong interpretation of data set. And finally, looking at the mini strategy, it highlights the importance in investing in good IT service security. And in fact, by using artificial intelligence and hiring qualified employees, we can collect and develop valuable internal knowledge. Then we also looked at the involvement of the various stakeholders during the value creation wheel phases. In particular, we divided the stakeholder in 5 different categories: employees, government, environment, data management, and other stakeholders. And in each category, we try to find the most important stakeholders. And in this image, we can see in the phases in which they are involved. Then, moving on, we also looked at the KPIs for the project that are very useful and essential to evaluate in the end our project. In particular, we identified 4 different segments, and for each segment, such as project process, project output, and short and long-term project outcome, we identified some objectives. and the KPIs to evaluate this objective, the achievement of this objective. And another thing that we did is that we tried to understand the importance for our project of these KPIs. Then moving on to the second phase, that is the phase of create value, we took in consideration all the 193 member states of the United States. This in order to prevent any prejudice and the possibility to miss some promising countries. For what concerns instead the filters, in order to have a more comprehensible view of the possible filters that we need, we try to involve both internal and external stakeholders. For what concerns the internal stakeholders, we proceed in 3 steps. The first step was the brainwriting, in which every internal stakeholder came up individually with more than 10 filters, and we added them in a digital platform that is called Miro. In the second phase, there was a phase of brainstorming in which all internal stakeholders meet together and discuss all the filters that we found, and also we added new filters that came up during the discussion. And finally, as third step, there was a filter clustering in which we clustered all the filters that we found according to the Pastel categories to have a better overview. Then we also tried to reach out to external stakeholders to improve the quality of our filters, and in this case, we have collected and reached out to 25 different external stakeholders. We divided stakeholders in 3 different categories. The first one was different types of engineers, like civil, environmental, and energy engineers. Then the second category was private companies that use or manage critical infrastructure for their own operations. And the third category, our competitors. We reached them out through an email and or LinkedIn, and in this message we inserted a quick and simple survey. Unfortunately, we received only one feedback from a competitor, that was Orbital, but this was very important in any case for our filters. In fact, thanks to both internal and external stakeholders, we were able to find 64 filters that were collected, and as we said before, we divided them in the different categories, and as we can see in this slide, there are all the 64 filters of phase 2. And now I leave the floor to Luisa.
Thank you. I will now talk about phase 3 of validating value for Bta solutions. So we then decided to include the 193 member states of the United Nations to keep as possible solutions for Bta. After this choice, the poker method was applied by the Bta team in order to streamline a possible solution, which we then divided into 4 key aspects, such as scale, review, multiplier, keep, enabling us to after apply to the Bta solution. After this application, in total, 12 global filters were chosen and 5 local filters were selected in order to help the ranking process. The global filters chosen were the amount of nuclear power plants, countries with most natural disasters, country risk, country level of corruption, easiness of doing business, GDP, Internet Development Index, level of innovation, number of procedures to start businesses, exposure to natural disasters, population, and SDG commitment level. Local filters, regional GDP, population per region, number of nuclear power plants, natural disaster risks per regions since 1953, and natural disaster preparation ranking. Due to the lack of accurate data, various previous selected global and local filters needed to be selected. Therefore, this was the final solution. After the ranking was done, it was then divided into 2-step processes in which a group discussion was processed in order to have the ultimate and final decisions. Thank you. I will now pass the floor to Bta to talk about phase 4 of capturing value.
So moving on to phase 4A, we use two value creation funnels to determine the country and region where BTA can best establish its service. First, we apply 12 global filters to the solution options. We use the population filter as a proxy for the number of critical infrastructures. This means that for us, the higher the population, the higher number of critical infrastructures. The exposed to natural disasters, rank 4th, is also crucial, as a country with high risk of such disaster will focus more on controlling the security of its critical infrastructures. Finally, we have also taken into account the number of nuclear power plants, not because we want to specialize in them, but because we believe that their existence is also a good indicator of the number of critical infrastructures. After applying the filters, we concluded that the country with the most potential is the United States, fact that was also verified by the multi-criteria decision analysis. Then we applied 5 local filters to understand which state has better advantages for us, and so we arrived at our final destination, Texas. We decided to also use population as a proxy for the number of critical infrastructures. The regional GPA was also considered because we wanted to enter a state with possibilities to pay for our service. Besides the risk of natural disasters, we also consider the natural disaster preparation ranking because a state ranked lower has a bigger will to increase its position on state security. Again, the multi-criteria decision analysis confirmed the funnel decision, so in fact, Texas is the state with a higher potential. In conclusion, USA has a high population, which means high number of critical infrastructures, has the highest amount of nuclear power plants in the world. It is also the third most innovative country in the world, and it was the second most affected country by natural disasters in 2020. In terms of Texas, it has the second highest population in the US. It's the country with the highest risk for natural disasters, but the least prepared for it, and currently has 2 operating nuclear power plants. After identifying Texas as the market with the highest potential for BTA, in phase 4B we now need to define how the startup wants to position itself in the consumer's mind. BTA Earth Observation Service can serve 4 different end users segments: governments, private operators, insurance companies, and other institutions. Among these, we decided to mainly target governments, and this choice was dictated considering the fact that national and regional governments normally own and operate the majority of critical infrastructures. It is common for them to contract their maintenance and operations to private companies. Finally, within the target audience of BTA, the startup positioned itself in the downstream part of the Earth observation value chain as the missing link between data providers, analysts, and the end user. BTA positioning is important to differentiate itself from the major competitors. Although there are no companies in downstream industry located directly in Texas that can compete with us, we identified other 2 US companies, in addition to the already mentioned Moshki and Razer, that can be considered direct competitors and operate throughout the US and worldwide, being them, Orbita Insight, and Hashtag. In order to clearly understand how BTA can differentiate itself from its competitors, we performed the analysis shown in the graph. It is possible to conclude that the startup is able to create and maintain a competitive advantage over its rivals by focusing on improving AI-based recommendations, providing a user-friendly service throughout a simplified mobile app and websites, and by understanding local needs. To maintain this competitive edge, BTA also plans to locate in Houston, the largest city in Texas, which is considered an entrepreneur's dream thanks to its co-working spaces designed for startups to collaborate and network, such as the Houston Technology Center. In this way, BTA can ensure a high level of knowledge of local needs and geographically proximity to key stakeholders. In developing the Bta prototype, we applied the Scamper method, starting from what Razer provides and modifying it and adapting it until we arrive at the final Bta prototype. In particular, we modified Razor's use of Earth observation data to information about critical infrastructures by providing additional, clear recommendations for actions to be taken, thanks to the use of IE. In this way, less technical expertise is required for the end user. Moreover, we adapt BTA's offer to primarily target governments, companies, and managers. We have combined the BTA services with the possibility to access all the information throughout powerful platforms such as the website for the monthly reports and the app for the live data. So in terms of conceptualization, we intend to present our clients with a website and a mobile app. On the website, consumers will have access to all the information about their critical infrastructure, including live reports, review reports, and simulations. In the app, consumers will have access to daily reports showing the percentage of safety recommended and recommended actions if there are any problems. As you can see in the two examples, in the first one, everything is okay, meaning the safety percentage is at 100. However, in the second case, something is happening, making the security level only 80%, but the recommendation for app action appears to the user. Finally, to reach out to our consumer target in Texas with our product, we define the 7 Ps of the marketing mix to clearly understand the best kind of plan for that For that, we define many aspects, as for example, we defined that our main type of promotion is going to be direct interaction with clients and potential clients. With this, we complete phase 4, and I will now pass my word to Alex.
In phase 5, I will present you how we actually capture value. And we as a team address the 3 M's metric that is one of the main resources that is required to implement a go-to-market strategy. And therefore, we are looking in more detail of the manpower, minute, and money. But let's start with manpower. So as we are a startup, it is essential for us to only select the most needed employees to keep the costs manageable. And our team, so basically all the key decision makers, already have a wide range of expertise, and therefore we can take care of most aspects of the daily business of BTA. And this includes, as you can see on the slide here, for instance, accounting, daily operations, the HR management, all business law related topics, just like marketing and of course the analysis of our business. Nevertheless, we still need some additional employees because we have a lack in some areas. And therefore, we defined the task-relevant maturity and came to the conclusion that we need a software developer, a data analyst, a data engineer, and a consultant. And now I will quickly explain what these employees will do as a daily business for us. So the software developer is responsible for creating, testing, programming, and developing a user-friendly platform for our app and the web page. The data analyst is responsible to create a business analysis with the data gathered from our data engineer. And this also includes the preparation of the reports with solutions and recommendations for our customers. So the data engineer will be responsible for the actual interpretation of the data that we gather from the Earth observation satellites. And this data will already be analyzed by our AI algorithm, but the data engineer will always have the last word. And last but not least, our consultant is responsible for the direct contact with our customers, or he will basically be the go-to person, and he will also be always on site with our customers. And now going over to Minute. So to give a better overview and also for a better understanding what we are actually doing, we structured our upcoming business activities. And therefore we created a diagram, as you can see here, that shows our main deliverables and milestones with the starting point of our business in January 2022. So in like next month. And of course, we are going to adapt this plan if necessary, but for now it already gives a detailed overview of our company's ambitions and the timeline. And for example, yeah, like you can see here, we are going to start to network with potential stakeholders in June next year, and we plan to launch the marketing campaign, yeah, also in July of 2022. And now, of course, one of the most interesting parts, the money. Yeah, after we shared now our time planning, we also need to understand the monetary resources that our project will require. And to actually launch our project and to go to the market, we need a sum of 530,000 US dollars in total. And this amount exists of the sum of all parts that are listed in this diagram. And to calculate the money, yeah, we basically did a lot of research to define the amount that we need. And as you can see, the highest amount we have to spend are the monthly salaries for our employees. And moreover, we are going to spend up to 10% of the annual budget on advertising and events, as we want to increase Bta's publicity dramatically within the next 12 months. And all the costs that I have mentioned already will be funded mainly by a bank loan that we are getting, but also by savings that all of us, the key decision makers, already have. Yeah, but in addition, we are also going to reach out to several investors who will also support us financially, as well as the money we will generate through crowdfunding. So after we are going to launch our service and actually sell our services, therefore we develop two different service packages that Bta will offer to the customers. So first we have the basic package that is at a price of 20,000 US dollar per year, and this includes monthly updates of the EO images, maps that show the monthly changes, reports with analyzed recommendation of our AI algorithm, and of course it also includes the app and the account for our website where the customer can download the reports. And for the Plus package, the cost will be $30,000 per year. And this includes all services that are already part of the basic package, but the data will always be on a daily basis instead of a monthly basis, as it is the case for the basic package. And the reports can also be downloaded in the offline mode. And of course, there are some additional and customized features in the Plus package that for instance, the Bta consultant service. Because like I already mentioned before, that one of our consultants will always be on site with the customer to help them with all the services and actually the adaptation of our reports and all the findings that we made. So going further, here you can see the business model canvas of our startup Bta, and this gives a good overview and a short summary of our project that we explained in this presentation already in detail. And basically the business model canvas is to show, we can show this to our customers and potential investors just to give them a quick and good overview of the services that we are going to offer. And here you can see our KPIs, and I will give you a quick overview. And as you can see, we achieved most of our project goals for the two segments, project process and project output. And for the short-term and long-term project outcomes, the evaluation is not yet accessible, but will be if we continue to expand our business in 2022. And coming to an end, we have a clear roadmap for a successful launch. And as you can see, here are basically the main steps that we want to achieve in the next year. And the final goal, of course, is to then expand Bta's service to different countries and industries after we have settled and established our services. And yeah, this is the main goal. So thank you very much, guys. We as a team want to thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed our presentation.